That would be good to have you next year.
Well, you're taking the video off.
Okay, it's going.
All right. To begin with, I think I should explain that I was a very shy girl. And I'm not going to cry. And so it was difficult for me, especially with men that were so much bigger than me. And my husband, Connie's dad, had a business in a small town, and I stayed home with Connie, and we lived on a lot that was a corner lot, and so there was a lot of yard work to do, and I grew gladiolas, trained them up to be around a big fence. I had all colors of gladiolas because I loved them so. One day I was out in the yard tending to the yard work, and a man came up and parked and came over to the fence, and he said, is Norman Paul your husband? And I said, yes, he is. He says, I need to leave a message for him. Can I give it to you? And I said, yes. And so he came over then to the gate and opened it and walked in. I didn't think much about it. But he said, I think you better go get a pencil and paper to write it down because I want to be sure he gets the message accurately. So I said, okay, and I went to the house to get the pencil and paper, and when I turned around, he was in the house right behind me. And he grabbed me, and it scared me so bad. I hit him in the stomach to get away, and I yelled back at him, I'm calling the police! And he took off. And I sat down and thought about it, and I thought, I asked for that. I used to wear a halter in shorts to work out in the yard because it was so hot. And I thought, you asked for that. You should dress modestly. And I didn't know about the church then, but from then on I tried to dress modestly and not, make problems for myself. And yet that incident caused me to be especially scared of men that came to the door. And we lived in a little town called Griswold at that time, and we moved then to Atlantic, and Norman went to work for his dad as an apprentice because the government had a program that they would pay for apprenticeships. And Norman was not happy in the work he was doing. So he worked for his father as an apprentice to learn to be an upholsterer. But they used to get into it and just have fights that were terrible, screaming at each other and so on.
Grandpa and his dad?
Uh-huh. Because Norman felt he knew a better way to do things. And Daddy Paul had his idea. And he would get so mad when Norman was doing truck seats for the state of Iowa, because Norman was doing them with a curvature that fit under your knees. And Daddy Paul said, no, it should be round like a cookie. A cookie, he said, to beat on the thing. Oh, and finally, neither of them could stand each other anymore. So Norman quit, and we were living in a little apartment that we shared with an older lady that rented out part of her home. And she had a big barn behind, and Norman fixed that barn up to be his own upholstery shop. And to begin with, he was going to finish that order for the state trucks. And I kept saying, you can't do this. You cannot go into business against your father in the town that he started out in so many years ago. This is not right. But Norman insisted, and the rats were so bad in that big barn that he'd work a while and then he'd hurry into the house and have to get his nerve up again because they would come right up to him and crawl on his legs and stuff, no matter what he did. So anyway, finally he couldn't stand it anymore, and he went looking and found a place in a little town called Griswold where he could rent a shop, and we bought a little 3-room house that a farmer was selling and had it moved in to a corner lot in Griswold and fixed it up. And we did just fine because Connie was in the baby bed, and so it worked out good. And from then, we moved to Red Oak, where he had more clientele for what he was doing, but he didn't like what he was doing, and so he had a chance to become a car salesman, and he turned out to be one of their best. He sold Chryslers, and Norman always had a way with older women. They just adored him. And he would play up to their adoration of him, a young, handsome man that was paying attention to him. And I didn't care. I knew it was all for the money. It was surprising they didn't figure out it was for the money, but they never seemed to. And so that's where we went from there. And
every Sunday we used to go visit Grandma.
yes, every Sunday we would go visit Grandma Paul and the Paul family and cook dinner and have a big dinner there. And her back was so bad that she couldn't do a lot in the kitchen. And so sometimes we would stay after the dinner. Norman would go back to where we were living to do his business, and we would stay there so I could do extra things for her, ironing and stuff she couldn't do. And the Mormon missionaries came to her house when I was there, and she let them in, and I never would have. 2 big young men that you were alone in the house. I never would have done it. And so I got up and left the room, and she hadn't done her lunch dishes, so I thought I'll go do her dishes and listen to see what they got up their sleeve. And I was making so much noise with the water and the dishes, I couldn't hear good. So I quit doing that and snuck into the dining room where I could hear better. And they're talking to her about a kind of cement that the Indians made in Central America that was far superior to our cement of today. And I thought, oh, come on now. That is not possible. So I walked in there and I said, I don't know what you guys are selling, but this is ridiculous, what you just said about cement. And they said, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but this is the proof. And they began to show me pictures up close of cement that never crumbled. And I thought to myself, well, old girl, maybe if you sit down and shut up, you might learn something. Because I thought I knew, and I didn't know.
You liked archaeology, even.
Yes, I loved archaeology, and I had never read anything about cement that was superior. And why would it be superior? And so I sat down and listened to them, which wasn't the whole thing about cement. It was all about the gospel. And that really fascinated me. And so they gave Mama Jo a Book of Mormon and got her to commit to read it, and they would come back the following week. And so I was staying with her that week to help with a huge ironing that had piled up.
Yeah, so you just happened to be there, right?
Yes.
It was just all a coincidence that you were there.
A very
And did they give
big
it to her or did they sell
coincidence.
it to her?
Pardon?
Did they give it to her or did they sell it to her?
They gave it to her. There was no money involved. So after they left, she and I talked a little bit, and then we went, I went to do her ironing and stuff. And I would ask her then, have you started that book? No, she says, I'm not really interested. And I said, well, do you care if I read a little? And when you're ready to read, I'll give it to you. She says, no, that's fine. In fact, you read it and tell me what it's about, she said. So I took the book and started reading it. And I couldn't put it down. I'd always loved stories about Indians anyway. And this was just fascinating to me. And I thought, how could I love history so and not have come across this before? Because I thought in school that was my favorite subject, was history, and second geography, and never had I heard this. And so I would keep offering to give her back the book. I'd say, oh, Grandma, it says, and I'd tell her stuff. She said, they don't know what they're talking about. And so I just kept reading the book, and they did come back like they said they would. And they asked her, had you read it? She says, no, I'm really not interested. But she says, my Jeannie has been reading it. And so they turned to me and they said, what do you think? And I said, well, I've got a whole bunch of questions, if you don't mind. And so I started shooting questions at them, and they had an answer for every single thing that I could think of. And then I asked, is there more? Yes, they said there's more. And they gave me then the Pearl of Great Price. And
Jenny wants to say something.
What year was this?
I would say Connie was probably 3 years old. That's what
49. 49?
that would be my guess. She might have been not quite 3,
Yeah.
Yeah, so 48, 49.
but somewhere along in there.
Now, had you read the whole book before the missionaries came?
Yes,
That week, the next week.
yes.
In
The
one
Book of
week, you read
Mormon.
the whole Book of Mormon in 1 week?
Yes. I couldn't put it down. I had gone there to help her with her ironing, and it bothered me so that I was neglecting that ironing. And so I fixed a little thing with a coat hanger so it could stand up, and I could read and iron at the same time.
Did you feel the spirit when you read it?
Yes,
But you didn't know what.
I didn't know what it was. I only knew that it was answering questions that I had had for years. Questions that I had asked so many different preachers. And they would look at me like, she's a strange one, but they didn't have answers for me. And so I'd discuss it with them. Could it be this or could it be that? And they'd all just shake their head and give up. You know, they didn't know what I was aiming for.
Were there areas of the Book of Mormon or parts that stood out to you? Do you remember that first time you read it? Anything that really stuck out?
Yes, there were several. The fact that God had a body, and Jesus too. Because I had always been taught that we were, I guess, like a mist or something nebulous. And so anyway, they had answers to my questions. And it just fascinated me because their answers made sense. And they would refer me to other reading in the Bible, which just pleased me no end. And it all connected. Because up until then, many parts of the Bible I couldn't understand. I would try to pick it apart and reason with myself, but it just would not come together. So, anyway, they came back, and when they found out I had read, they said, "Do you have any questions?" I said, "Oh boy, do I." So I started shooting my questions at them, and they had answers. And so I got a little suspicious. I said, "What do you base that on? How do you know that answer?" And they said, "Well, it's in this book," and they get the Book of Mormon, and the Pearl of Great Price, and the Doctrine and Covenants. Whole new things to me. But yet they would constantly back it up with the Bible, from the Old Testament and the New Testament. So I was just thrilled. I went home and took all those books with me after I'd finished her ironing and stuff. We would take the bus back, Connie and I. Or we would try to time it to be ready when Norman would come on Sunday again. Because he liked to go see his mom every Sunday. And so, anyway, I had fascinating reading to do. But again, it would involve with more questions. And they then made a date, an appointment, to come see me in Red Oak, which was where we were living at that time. And I was tickled to death because then they could answer my questions and show me where they got the proof. In the meantime, my dad was selling Mormon feed, not the same Mormon as the church's name, feed to farmers. And his route included Red Oak, which was the little town where we were living, and Norman was selling cars. And quite often my folks Mom and Dad both would come. Mom would come with him when he had his route to do in Red Oak. And she'd stay with me while Dad worked, and then I'd feed him and they'd go on back home. So they came, and they hadn't been there, I would say not even a half an hour, when the missionaries came, who had made arrangements with me that when they could, they had to get permission, they would come to Red Oak and answer any questions I might have. And what you know, they showed up. And Mom had only been there a little while. Dad was still there even. He hadn't left to go do his stuff. And I can wait. So when Dad found out, I was so tickled. I said, "Oh, I'm so glad that you're here. I want you to meet these young men." And I introduced them. And my dad said, "And tell me the name of your church." And they did. And he said, "You get out of here, and you get out of here now." I said, "Dad, why? What is the big deal? If you'll sit down and listen, you'll find out some good information. It's true, all that we know about Jesus." My dad was a member of the board of the Church of Christ in Atlanta, and had been for many years. And he had some really queer ideas about Mormons. I don't know where he got them. But anyway, Dad said, "I will not sit here and listen. If they don't leave, we are leaving right now." And I said to the guys, I said, "I'm very sorry. Phone me and we'll work out something." And so the missionaries left, and I had all those questions I wanted to ask them about the Book of Mormon. I was just so disappointed. And so after they left, I tried to reason with Dad. I said, "What is this that you are so adamant and against them what are you thinking about? And so he said, I don't even want to tell you the terrible things that those men do. He said, they're awful. And you will not have them anymore in your house. I said, Dad, I'm a grown woman, I'm married. I think I should decide who comes to my house and who doesn't. And he said, well, if you have them anymore, we will not be coming. I said, oh, this is ridiculous. And then Mom piped in. Mom said, do you know they don't even believe in Jesus? I said, oh, yes, they do. I said, almost every page of the Book of Mormon has something in it about Jesus. And so I opened the book. I said, here, look at this. She said, no. She would not even touch that book. She was scared to take that book from my hand and look at the printed page. It was just utterly ridiculous. So anyway, Mom and Dad left, but they didn't leave in good spirits at all. Dad was very angry with me. And I found out later, the missionaries had looked up on the church records, and there was one older lady living in the town of Red Oak, but was not active. I suppose there was nothing there for her to be active with. And I had not met her, but they looked her up to ask if they could stay until the next bus came so they could get back to Atlantic that way, the way they planned. So it turned out okay, but I was left with all those questions. And so what they did, they stayed overnight with that older lady, and the next morning they showed up. And of course, Mom and Dad were gone by then. I was so tickled. They came in, and I began shooting questions at them. And quite often they would take the Bible, either the Old or the New Testament, and help me see the answer. And I had not seen it before. I had not connected with it before. So that was a very fascinating time for me.
How did my dad feel about it?
Well, I didn't tell him that the missionaries had come because I knew he would think ill of me if I invited young men into the house and I was there alone. I knew it would cause a big catastrophe, so I didn't mention it to him. But he did see me reading the Book of Mormon, because I read it and reread it. And so he asked, and then I told him, and he said, don't have him back anymore. This is not right. You don't know what you're doing. So anyway, that was kind of took care of that. But I had the Pearl of Great Price and the Doctrine and Covenants too that I didn't tell him about. I thought, boy, if he gets that mad over the Book of Mormon, I don't think I want to mention any more. I guess it was sneaky of me, but I knew that he was a jealous person. And I thought, I'm not going to give him any more reason to be angry.
So from that point to then further interaction with the church, how did that?
Was the church called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints even then?
Pardon?
Was the church called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
Yes.
What is
Then
that?
why did
And
they
that's
think
what
it
I
was
said to my mother when she said they don't even believe in Jesus. I said, Mother, their name is, and I explained it to her, and I said almost every page of this book says something about Jesus. Here, look, see what it says. And she backed on. No, I'm not touching that. He said, you just don't know. We're older. We know.
So how did you get your questions answered? Was that when you wrote to the ladies in Omaha?
Yeah, what I remembered was the missionaries had mentioned that in Council Bluffs there is a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And it's very active and, thriving.
That was how far away?
Council Bluffs was 50 miles, I'd say.
But in those days, that might have as well have been 500.
And
We
I
didn't go
They have the I-80.
anywhere.
and I didn't drive then. Norman didn't feel that women had enough sense to be able to drive safely.
Later, you taught yourself how to drive, didn't
Yes.
you? She sneaked the car
It's,
and had
You
me
are
babysit my
sneaky.
brother.
Grandma was a sneaky person.
Also, right,
We should watch her.
because we lived catty corner from a high school, and they had a big track. And I thought, if I can get that car over to that track, I can practice backing up and parking and all those kinds of things
Going around
safer.
curves.
And Norman always slept late on Sunday mornings. He would usually sleep till noon or so. And so I would get Connie up and feed her. And Dudley was a little baby, and I would get him fed and to sleep, and then I'd say, now, you watch your brother, and if he chokes or something, you come outside and wave, and I'll come right home, because I won't be far.
Do you remember that?
So that's,
How old was Mom?
I must have been 6 or 7.
oh, are you sure?
Well, my brother was born when I was 5 1/2.
Yes. And I was thinking it was about then.
So he was a new baby.
But anyway, so that was how I taught myself to drive, is I would, first of all, I'd watch where he parked and how he parked it, so I could get it back in the same location.
You were sneaky. Wow.
And so I would, and I had such a devil of a time getting it shifted into reverse that it just didn't happen.
What kind of a car was
It's
it?
like
A Dodge.
the 3 on the tree or
No, it was on the floor. And you made an H, because I watched him. And he made an H when he drove.
So how did we get to Council Bluffs to go to church sometimes? By bus?
Yes. Uh-huh.
And that wasn't very often, was it?
No, about once a year.
And then
So-
for 1948 or so, that's when you first read the Book of Mormon. How long did it take until you were able to get baptized?
What year were
I
you
was
baptized?
baptized in 58.
Because I was baptized in 59.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So
So
many years
did you
later.
keep track of all the missionaries that kind of helped you and taught you along the way?
Well, in a way, there weren't that many.
Well, that's. I was wondering how many were there that taught you.
Well, let me explain that the missionaries had talked about an active church with a bishop in Council Bluffs. I began to have a whole list of questions, important questions. And so I wrote them all down, and I addressed the envelope to the Bishop of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Council Bluffs, Iowa. And it got delivered. And so the bishop read my letter with all my questions, and he took it into the gospel doctrine discussion class and said, here is what I would like you to do. Take this sister's questions and as a class answer them and write her a letter. And so that's what they did. And two sisters in that class became very close friends. We wrote almost every week, back and forth. And I kept having questions. And so every Sunday they'd give out a new assignment to answer this lady's question.
It took a whole class to answer them.
So, Grandma, you had never met these sisters.
No,
You were good friends
Ken
through your
passed.
letters.
Yes, Ken passed.
Did you have a telephone? Or not so much?
That would have been long distance too.
Yeah,
Long
and
distance, huh?
I wouldn't be able to phone because Norman paid the bills. I didn't want to upset him.
Right.
Long distance was expensive.
Very
Like, even when we first got married, I could never call home to talk to Mom because it was too expensive when we first got married.
And then it just took, so how many years did you go like that with just writing letters and not really being able to go to church? Because you wouldn't really ever go to church for years probably, right?
Yeah,
right.
For years and years.
Oh,
No one.
I don't even know. I have to get out.
Probably 10
Probably you
years.
moved to Florida and then you were able
Yes,
to
I would guess it was a good 10 years.
But you got baptized in Florida?
I-
No, you were baptized before you moved to Florida?
Then she did it, right? Grandma, didn't you go to a state
Yeah.
conference? Was that the first meeting that you went to? What was it? Didn't you travel to a state conference or travel to
Was it the dedication of the Mormon bridge?
It was the dedication of the Mormon bridge, and President McKay was going to be there to do the dedication. That I found in my local paper. And so I made up my mind I was going to see a prophet. I knew I couldn't talk to him, but I wanted to see if he looked different or something. And so there was the problem of the money for the bus ticket. And I talked to Norman about it, quite frankly. I wasn't trying to keep it hidden. And I explained why I wanted to go. And he said, well, how are you going to pay for the bus ticket? And I said, well, I thought I could use some of the grocery money because we won't be here for a day or two to eat groceries. So he says, okay, if you can manage on that, that's fine. He didn't mean to be mean. He was just not understanding.
Well, there wasn't any money to spare. There was
So,
no-
Grandma, was there ever an instant that hit you that you knew the church was true? Because what drove
Oh, yes.
you to just keep at it and not give up?
And at what point was that?
It was very early in reading the Book of Mormon. I knew it was true. I knew inside. And so that's why I couldn't quit. I had to finish reading, and I had to get more reading to do. And everything I read all made sense, and it all fit together.
So when you prayed about it, didn't you come to that verse in Moroni where you're prompted to pray and you're promised?
Yes, yes. And so I followed that exactly. And in my prayers that night, and I always prayed on my knees, I had asked it, and nothing happened. And so I thought, well, maybe I have to ask more than once. And so I climbed in bed and I laid there thinking about it. And I was thinking, I wonder if that Book of Mormon is true. And it came to me like there were 200 people in the room all shouting, yes, it's true. And so I couldn't sleep for a long time. And I got back on my knees to thank God and to ask for guidance to know more. Because it was the true church, there had to be more than just what little bit I knew.
Well, and my dad was so unhappy about it, and your parents were.
Yes.
Were they threatening to take me away and
Well, they
disown you?
threatened, when Dad threw the missionaries out of the house and don't you ever come back. He turned to me and he said, I mean this seriously. You have anything to do with those people and you are no longer a daughter of mine. He said, they're evil people. Evil. He said, you have no idea how evil they are. I found out later, my dad and mom were avid readers. And they especially liked Zane Grey. And they read everything he ever wrote. Well, Zane Grey fictitiously made up terrible stories about Mormons in his book.
They were kind of Old West books. weren't they?
Yes,
Yeah.
they were all Old West. And all that he wrote was fictitious. And when I found that, and I took it to Mom and Dad to show them, oh, they didn't like it at all. They said, whoever wrote this is wrong. Zane Grey wrote from his heart, and he researched everything he wrote. Every word he wrote is true.
Good old Zane Grey.
So it didn't work.
Well, Grandma, isn't it so neat for you to now be almost 85? You're coming up on your 85th
Yes.
birthday here. And to see all of us sitting around you. And
It
how
is.
many, we hear in conference talks stories of the ripple effect and one person, and you think, oh, it's just one person. And then they'll tell the story about how now that person had this kids and these many grandkids, and it multiplies by the hundreds.
Yes.
And I just think it's so neat to have you here now, and for you to be able to see all of this, for
It's
you to
neat
see
for
it.
me.
Yeah, you're one inspirational lady.
And because you're also active, you all have your own testimony that is true. And you're all living as you should. Knock on wood. We don't get anybody on drugs or alcohol or hooked on nicotine. We're living the best we can. We're not perfect, but we're living the very best that we can.
So then, Grandma, how did you finally get baptized? What happened later in 1958?
It kept bugging me. I needed to be baptized. I wanted to be baptized. And Norman just would not give in.
You had asked him probably several times
Yes,
along the years,
yes.
like, I really want to get baptized.
Yeah. And nothing I seemed to say or do would affect him because he had no testimony. And he would always bring up to me, now look, I joined one church for you, I'm not joining any more. Because I did, when we were going together, his mom was a member of the Church of God, I think it's called. We called them Holy Rollers because they would
Roll around.
and they would
Pass out.
speak in tongues and stuff. They were far out, but good people. And so he said, I'm not joining any more churches. I've done it. And he said, and you leave them alone. He said, I will not have you alone in the house with young men. He said, that is nothing for Connie to see.
Would you say that, would you like ask him and then wait a month and ask, or was it like once a year you bring it up, or was it like a constant kind of friction?
I would bring it up when I would read in the paper of something special going on in Council Bluffs.
Oh, tell us about that, when the prophet came.
Yes, he came to dedicate that bridge that was built in the exact spot that the Mormons built a bridge to cross the Missouri River. And I wanted to go. And he said, this is ridiculous. And by then, there were 2 women in the gospel doctrine class that had been assigned by the bishop to write me letters. But the whole class would participate in what should go into those letters. But those 2 women then would write to me. And we became quite good friends. I would just appreciate it so much having my questions answered.
Did you go stay with them when you went?
Yes, and so when I read about the prophet coming, I wrote and asked him if I could get a bus over there, could I stay with one of you and go with you to the bridge dedication? And they wrote back, yes, you can. And so I began saving money out of the groceries, and I didn't know about fasting But I knew that if I didn't eat very much, I would have to buy a lot for me, not to make Connie short or my husband short. But I didn't eat as much as I was eating, and so I would put that back and to save, because I think the bus fare was $3, and they didn't charge for Connie because she was little. So anyway, I got it saved up to go, and I was to stay with one of those sisters, and one of them or both would come to the bus station to meet me and take me to their homes. So that's what we did, and
But you not only saw the prophet.
The prophet spoke at a church gathering after the dedication of the bridge. And of course, we stayed for it. And they got us seats down as close to the front as possible because I'm so short. And that way I could see good. And after he finished speaking, then people began to line up to go shake his hand. And they said to me, "Wouldn't you like to shake his hand?" And I said, "Well, yes, I would, but I'm not going to do that. All these people want to go and do that, and I'm not even a member or anything. What would I say to him?" And so I hung back, and eventually that line kind of dribbled out. And they said, "Okay, we're going now." They picked me up and got me up there, and they introduced me to him as an investigator of the church who had read the Book of Mormon. And he took my hand, I'm going to cry. His eyes were like eyes of no one I had ever seen. There was a light in his eyes that I knew Jesus would look like in his eyes. And he took my hand in both of his hands. And he asked me, had I read the Book of Mormon? And I said, yes. And he said, "Do you think it's true?" I said, "Yes, I know it's true." And he then put his hand to the side of my head and patted me because he was told. And he said, "May God bless you, my sister." And I had never heard words like that before. None of our preachers ever talked like that or looked like he did in his eyes. And I knew then that I had not made a mistake at all. And so I went back home, and Mom and Dad came, and I tried to talk to them about this man that I had met and what he seemed like. And they both got very angry, especially Dad. And he was so threatening and different than Dad had ever been. We'd always had a good relationship, Dad and I. And there was nothing there of love at all. He was just angry. And so it made me realize that this evidently was the true church that I had been searching for, or it wouldn't have caused such a reaction.
Did you get permission to get baptized before Dad's business failed, or did that happen and then you were able to bargain with him? You'd move if...
Yeah, Norman's business had failed, almost. And so he went on the road selling his little Narmy boat that he produced, that
That should have made us all millionaires and didn't, thanks to Sears.
Yeah, that one.
That's right. We're better off.
So he made a lot of friends as he went, because he was a very personable guy. And there was one woman, especially, that he thought the world of. And one day, when I went to the post office, they said to me, "We've got a collection here of letters that are your husband's." And I said, "Oh, give them to me, and I'll take them home." So I took them, and I looked at the envelope, and they were all from the same woman. And I thought, what is going on here? So I decided I would open one and read it, because he was out on the road. He would go to Missouri and other places close by to sell his boat. And in the one that I opened and read, she talked about how sweet he looked first thing in the morning when she woke him up. Now, I didn't like that at all. So when he got back, I said, "What is going on here?" And he said, "Oh, for heaven's sakes, who do you think you are that you can open other people's mail?" I said, "Well, I think I'm your wife, and I know I shouldn't have, but I did." And I said, "And I want to know what is going on." And he says, "She's just a friend." And I said, "But why is she waking you up in the morning?" He says, "Because I slept in my car. I didn't have the money for a hotel. And she would come out and wake me in the morning so I could go in and shower and get ready for another day of sales." And so I said, "Well, okay, but it doesn't sound real good to me. It doesn't sound like something that you should be doing." And so I was cool to him. And finally he said, "This is ridiculous. I've done nothing wrong. You're accusing me falsely." And he said, "I have decided you make arrangements for Connie to stay with the grandparents, and you're going with me. I want you to meet this woman, and you'll find out there's nothing going on. She's just a friend." So I said, "Okay." So that's what I did, and I went with him. And she was a nice woman. She really was. And I liked her right away, and she seemed to like me. And so that kind of settled that part of what I had imagined. But I still didn't like the fact that we were apart so much. Sometimes he would be gone all week, sometimes 2 weeks at a time. I've lost my train of thought of what
Why did we move to Florida?
Or what we're trying to get to when you finally were able to get baptized.
Did you get
and
But it does have something
and
to do.
so
Yeah.
So he said to me one time, he says, "You know, I've been thinking about us." And he said, "I know you're not happy." And he said, "You're accusing me wrongly of something I have not done, and you need to get over this." And he said, "I've been trying to think of something that I could do that would make you happy." And he said, "How about if you go ahead and get baptized into that church that you're always asking me about?" And I thought to myself, well, this isn't exactly the way I wanted it to be, but I'm sure not going to refuse it. And I said, "Good, thank you." And he said, "And in return, you will not question me. You will believe me when I tell you there's nothing going on." I said, I will. So I surprised him. I called the Mormon missionaries right after he said that to me, because I wanted to catch them while they were still in Atlantic. And I told them,
You're in Red Oak still right now?
Pardon?
You're in Red Oak right now, or
I think we were.
yeah.
And we used to go to Atlantic on the weekends for me to help Mama Joe and fix a big Sunday
No, I
dinner.
think by then we'd moved back to Atlanta.
Maybe we had.
Because,
Yes, because he was making the little Darby book.
yeah,
But-
in Atlanta.
And with people hired. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
So the missionaries were in town. You had missionaries in town then.
Yes.
Right there.
Uh-huh. They were back again to tract it one more time.
So this is like 10 years later.
Yes.
And they happened to be there for
Yes.
a couple months or something like this.
Because that first time they tracted it, the only person they got that would be baptized lived out in the country outside of Atlantic, but no one in the town of Atlantic. So they were coming back to redo Atlantic to see if they couldn't get a little Sunday school start.
I feel so bad for those missionaries because you were the only convert and you couldn't be baptized.
Did they even know? Did they even know?
These were different missionaries, of course.
But that's my question. Do the original missionaries who tracked into Grandma, do they know that you ended up joining the church and having all these grandchildren and
Yes, because I wrote to the original ones. Then I still had their home addresses. And so, yes,
Okay.
that's one of the first things
So
I
then,
did.
so then you called them right then, and then what happened?
The missionaries now that were baptized.
After Norman gave you permission, you called up the missionary. You were able to get a hold of them right away.
Yes, and I said, I have permission from my husband to be baptized. And they said, we've got to have a little bit more than you just saying you've got permission. They said, would he sign something? And I said, I don't know, but I'll try. And he did, he signed it. He wasn't home when the missionaries came, but I had the paper with his signature.
But you didn't get baptized in Atlantic, did you?
No. Why did it have to be Council Bluffs?
Because they had a baptismal font, I bet.
Okay,
In Atlantic, they
yes.
didn't have a chapel.
All right, that's it. And so, and then I began saving money out of the groceries for Connie and I to go to Council Bluffs. Contacted these women and they were ready, willing to,
But I didn't get baptized that time. I got baptized the next year.
yes, she,
Because at this point, how old were you, Mom?
Like left.
11.
Okay.
you were the last.
uh-huh,
And so did anybody, the sisters that you had known, they went to your baptism and the
Yes.
bishop of the ward? So were you part of that ward? Were your
Yes.
boundaries included in that ward?
yes, I was. And they planned a beautiful baptism service. No one came but us, but the one sister could sing beautifully, the other one could play the piano, and they had beautiful music. And it was all about baptisms. And then they each gave talks, and then the missionary said something, so it was a very nice baptism.
Do you remember,
Grandma.
Mom?
Pardon?
I don't remember Mom's baptism. I remember mine, but not hers.
Grandma, what were the names of these sisters? Do you remember their names?
Yes, Evans was one, and
Thelma.
yeah, but what's Thelma's last name? Tripp. Yeah, Tripp.
Thelma, Tripp, and Sister Evans.
Uh-huh.
I don't know Sister Evans' first name either. But you remain friends with Thelma Tripp?
Oh, yes. Still,
Still.
I'm still friends with Thelma Tripp.
She lives in Ogden?
Uh-huh.
He
And,
lives in Ogden now.
yes, and we write back and forth.
Well, that is quite a story.
And then,
How? What age was Thelma Tripp? How old was
She
she?
was about my age.
About your age.
Uh-huh.
Do you know if she's still alive?
Oh, yes, she's the one that I call, probably once a month.
wow. And then did you ever get to go back to church that ward, or did you guys move?
No, I couldn't
Before
go
you-
to church there
Yeah.
because it was too
Too far
far
away.
away.
And so you
What
got
a story,
confirmed at
Mom.
that same, by the missionaries at
Yes.
the same time.
So tell us about the deal when you went to Florida. You go to
Yeah, the
Florida,
story.
you go to church.
All right,
There's still-
but just a moment, let me finish
Uh-huh.
up this
Yeah.
part. After I was baptized, I said to the missionaries, I said, I'm very disappointed. I don't feel different. I expected to feel like a whole new person. And I said, I'm not feeling it. I'm still the same me. And they said, it's because you were already converted in your heart and in your mind. It's people who were not converted that after their baptism feel elated and different.
I'm sure what you felt was probably just relief that I finally got to do this ordinance that I know I've
After
had
that
to
prayer.
do for 10 years.
And you had built it up so much over those 10 years.
Yes.
It wasn't as much as you thought it was, right?
Exactly.
That's
Well,
probably
and how many
part of-
converts got to have the prophet's hand placed upon their
Well,
head?
you know,
Yes. Yep.
Can't really top that.
And you were blessed.
Yes. Oh.
You got baptized in
ever
Council Bluffs too. You were still in Atlantic, and then it was shortly after that probably that you moved to.
Uh-huh.
So, Mom, did you go through the missionary discussions? Did the missionaries come over and teach you, or do you remember that?
Yeah, I do remember them coming a few times, but Mom taught me so good all those
When
years
you were-
growing up.
Kind of in
You
the
know.
basement, right? Underground.
No.
I always pictured it like secret primary.
No, in the living room of our home. She would order the books and we were right on
Jordan, I
schedule.
think there was a time there when Grandma would,
Norman wouldn't let
well,
her.
when you would have to study your lessons, you would have to study in the middle of the night because he didn't want it to take away
Well,
from your time.
that was when she was a seminary teacher.
Yeah.
And so she would get
That
up
was in
at
Florida.
4 in the morning to study
Uh-huh.
before early morning seminary. Yeah, you're right. So
Because
there
it
were-
would upset Norman so bad. I didn't want that kind of a home life. It wasn't that I was sneaky. It was that I was trying to avoid hollering and
So, I have never computed that, Mom, you're a convert.
Oh, yeah.
To me, you were baptized at 8. I had never thought that you were baptized at age 11 or 12, whatever that was.
I think I must
But
have
you
been.
had never been to church one time ever
No.
before you got baptized.
No,
You had
that's
never even
right.
been to a
Just
meeting.
taught by Mom.
Uh-huh.
And this year, reading the Jesus the Christ, I realized, because I've never tackled it before any length of time until my mission, and I realized the things that I was taught growing up were from Mom having read Jesus the Christ.
yes.
So they weren't news to me. They were the truth.
That became my favorite book, Jesus the Christ, because it answered so many questions
It's really good.
and it's so easy to understand.
You might need to set me straight. When Dad did not want to give me permission to get baptized. He felt that there was no way a child would know their mind, and he didn't want me to get baptized. And I asked often, and he said no. And then finally, I asked for my birthday.
Yes, he wanted to give you a donkey.
Oh, yeah. I was going to get a donkey and keep a burro in the garage out back of our house. Oh, I was looking forward to that donkey so much.
You wanted it.
I wanted it.
It wasn't his idea.
No,
You were.
no, I'm pretty sure it was my idea. I also wanted a monkey at one time.
But everyone wanted a monkey at one time in their lives.
Yeah.
So he asked, what I really wanted, and that's when I changed to wanting to be
Wanted to be baptized.
And
Did
he
you still
knew,
get the burrow?
no,
No, bro.
he knew how much I wanted the burro, so he figured I really did want to get baptized.
That convinced him.
Yeah, it did.
And then
And
Dudley,
he
Dudley was
didn't
how much later?
You were about 13,
I was
12.
It was in January, and then I turned 12 in March, so I was
Oh.
almost 12. But Dudley was
Born in
baptized
Florida?
closer to, we moved to Florida when he was like 6,
Yes.
Oh, so yeah.
so
you
he
made
was too young. How old would you say he was when he was baptized?
it.
Do you think he was 8?
So we don't spank you.
I think he was, because I was trying to live the laws of the church, so surely that was what I stuck to.
But when we moved to Florida, when we agreed to move, it was a big deal because it meant leaving everybody and everything we'd ever known. We knew we couldn't pack up even a U-Haul. There weren't such things as U-Hauls in those days. We could only trail a boat behind our station wagon.
But you're going to tell us a handcart.
That's about how much stuff we took.
Whatever in the boat, whatever could fit in the boat.
Whatever could fit in the boat, but then we had to take it out at night, and then my dad slept in the boat. And this is a little boat. This
Where
is
did you guys
boat in the station
We
wagon.
slept in the car.
Yeah.
On the floor.
Because
and
how long was the drive?
seats.
How long was the
Oh, it
3
always
days,
took us 5 days to get to Florida.
You guys
from
went
Iowa.
every year to Iowa?
Yeah, after we
Yes.
moved to Florida, we went back
5
every summer and every 5 days going, 5 days coming.
Well, you think about the speed limit though. Wasn't it like 55? It was a
And-
lot
It
slower.
was, and my dad was a coffee
Fishing
drinker.
along on the way. And stuff
We
like
stopped
that.
at coffee shops,
Had a boat.
and he had his coffee break. And there were no takeout places. You didn't get paper cups and
Yeah.
to go.
And we couldn't go in with him because of money.
He was the only one to get the treat. And we would walk around and wait for
Watch
him.
him out like now.
The window.
Dad gets the big gulp. Nobody else gets a soda because he has to drive.
But Dad promised us if we sold everything. We sold every piece of furniture except the dining room set, the sewing machine, just a few things that were really precious
that
to
was
us.
all.
That was it.
And our clothes. Some clothes.
We had a big auction at our house, and the stuff went for nothing. Oh, people got.
Yeah. My dad came to the auction and stayed beside me, and when I can't remember what it was.
The bedroom set.
Well,
Mom had painted her bedroom set in blue willow. She had this metal headboard, just an ugly metal headboard. She painted it white. She ordered patterns out of a magazine. And then she painted beautiful light blue, dark
you
blue.
thought this was gonna be like
Yeah.
up here.
Where's the blue willow?
Sorry guys,
So it was all over the dresser and all over the bed, and somebody bought that for like
and the chest of drawers.
$10.
Yes, $10. And I was just
family.
aghast. And Dad took a hold of my arm. He says, "You are coming with me." And he got me out of there and he took me home to Mom and he says, "And you stay right here. You don't need to know what prices you're getting."
She had a nice little stove that she took such good care of. It was just shiny like new,
Just selling off
and that was just went for nothing.
And then, so it sounds like you still had a
Yes.
pretty good relationship then after you're baptized?
Yes.
They got over it?
Yes, they got over it because there was no church present.
So you
And
weren't
so-
going to church or...
But Mom agreed to this big move if we could go to church once we got there. She knew there was a church, well, several of them. They didn't even know where they were going. My dad,
Just Florida.
But wait, did you ever go to church
Somewhere
with your
Florida, there's
family,
water.
like regularly?
Not regularly, but for special things, yes, I would go.
So Norman never really went to church ever.
so, where are we?
Grandpa, you guys just were going to Florida. You didn't
So
go there.
everything got auctioned off, and your
Yeah.
daddy rescued you from having to watch.
Uh-huh.
And then you packed everything up and
Yeah, we packed a suitcase for each of us of clothes.
A funny story is
What
that
did
Mom
you
was
eat
there.
on those
I remember
5-day
the
drives?
skillet.
Bologna. We would go to a grocer, like the little old grocery store where they wrap the
Sal's
meat
Market
in
and
white
stuff,
paper. And, yeah, and they didn't slice the bologna. Dad would pull out his pocket knife and slice
But I made
pieces
him
of
wish it.
bologna off first, and we'd buy a loaf of bread and bologna.
That's it.
No.
Did you have a refrigerator?
No,
How did you not get sick?
Salty.
then we'd buy the next day.
They
Oh.
they would eat enough for
So,
them.
Mom, do you have good memories of those travel days, or do you have bad memories of those travel days?
I have blanked them out because
That must be bad.
Mom tells me, "Oh, we went to this factory and that factory while your dad was taking a nap on a picnic table, and I don't remember visiting those factories. I'm sure it was very boring. I was a pain in the neck, 12 going on 13. I was 13 by the time we moved. And
Didn't want to be going.
I had my hair in a flip and hairspray like crazy, and I didn't want the windows down in the car, no air conditioning, summertime, and I did not like my hair blowing, so I was just really, we were
Teenager, preteen. You were a
And we
preteen.
would start out with Dudley and Tony in the back seat. That never lasted more than an hour.
Glad to know that that's been same through the ages.
Yes.
We're just discussing partitions in the car on the way here.
What really was
We
so
could
funny.
have a car made for us. It would be
Four
perfectly
compartments.
compartmentalized with a wall surrounding each one.
Little cubicles in that bus.
But the thing that just broke me up was Connie saying, "Mom, he's breathing on me." And he would lean over and snort on her arm. So we gave up.
Good for him.
Connie rode in the front seat, I rode in the back.
He used to chase me around the house. I was 6 years older than him, and I would squeal and run from him.
You
Was he
performed
chasing
just
you with something?
you performed just as he wanted
Nice.
you.
That's right. That's what I
Yeah.
tell my kids. You give them the reaction they're looking for.
Yeah.
That's
So
what you're
good.
gonna
So
get.
once you got to
Exactly.
Florida, then you were able to really become active and have callings
Yes,
and
because
all that stuff.
He slept almost all day Sunday, at least all morning or to early afternoon.
That we had a bad surprise when we got there. We finally settled on Pompano Beach. The nearest church was Fort Lauderdale. That was down a busy US 1, busier traffic than we'd ever experienced in Iowa. And Dad took us once and said, "That's it."
He said, "There's 17 miles from the door of our house to the door of this church. You're never coming again in this car anyway."
It was too far.
So then what you do?
So we didn't
Well,
go for a while.
Well, but I met the bishop that first Sunday in church, and the lady that we rode with, I called her and I said, "I need to talk to Bishop so and so. Do you have a phone number?" And she did have. So I called him and I said my situation, and I said, "Is there anyone that we could ride with to get a ride to church and back, because my husband sleeps during that time. He won't mind us being gone." And he said yes, there was a family in Pompano Beach. And so I contacted them and they were willing to take us. And they didn't live very far from us. And so on Sundays we would walk to their house and ride with them to church. And then when we got back, they'd park at their house and we'd walk home.
What did you do about the fact that it was two different meetings? It was Sunday school in the
Well, yeah,
morning.
'cause you
and
came home for
Saturday
lunch.
morning.
We could only go to one because
Just a
they
separate
only
meeting.
went to one.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
Now,
you
I have
went
a
to sacrament
question.
meeting for an hour probably.
Yes, yes.
Wasn't Grandpa Norman a chain smoker?
Yes.
So you grew up, Mom, probably smelling like cigarettes.
But it was a lot more common then.
I guess everybody smelled like
It wasn't.
You never
as-
felt self-conscious about
Yes, I
that.
should have. Never thought of
It was more common for that to be.
She
Back
didn't
when
know
a lot
she
of people
stunk.
smoked, everyone smelled like probably it was
Yeah,
really
because it was in all the businesses,
Yeah.
everywhere.
True.
smoke everywhere.
Which is a lot different.
Now if you're smoking, oh,
Yeah, it was a lot different then.
If someone comes into work that has smoked like, at all that day, they
More
think
sensitive.
That combination of cigarette and coffee together.
Oh.
The radio in
So
those
then
days
that
were
went like that
great
for-
sponsors of all the big important radio programs
For
were
cigarettes,
sponsored by
yeah.
tobacco.
Well,
Right,
and
right.
In those days, they thought it was good for you.
Yeah.
They thought it was healthy. Or Lucky Strike. LSMFT. Lucky Strike means fine tobacco.
Isn't it amazing how they both know?
Good advertising.
Good advertising.
Crazy.
Nice big 12 sing Sweep America.
Oh,
So what would you do?
Highlights.
I mean, now we have the TVs and the little phones and stuff.
Out the
The kids
window,
can play
like we did.
games. What did you do to entertain?
We played alphabet games with life.
That's what we did when we were kids.
Billboards.
Yeah.
And those
Friendship bracelet. We had like all of our music was on tapes and things. And so whenever we'd get to a town where we could get radio, we'd try to record as many songs as we could, so we'd have other songs to listen to when we didn't have. Yeah. Oh yeah. It was great.
In those days, there were billboards all along the way, right on the highway, and so you could play games with stuff you saw on the billboard.
So then you did that the whole time you were in Florida. You pretty much went to sacrament meeting. That was pretty much it. Did you have mutual or anything like that? or-
Yes, we had mutual, and Dad did not want me to go to mutual. He had this thing about safety. And he thought he was the only safe driver, and he really loved us.
In the
he really
world.
cared about us.
Right.
He didn't want us driving with anybody else.
Yeah.
So we had to get over that after a few years. And then I started my bad habit of telling white lies. I knew he didn't want me to go.
So we get it from the call.
So there's a gene for it. I guess.
Oh, we're doubly cursed.
I would just say, he'd say, "Where are you going?" I'm saying, "Oh, I'm going with my friends. We'll be back about 9:30." But I was going to mutual. So.
Well, if you're going to tell a white lie about going to mutual, I'm sure that's forgiven.
I
Like sneaking your
Reading
Doctrine and Covenants.
And that's pretty much how it was until you went to college, huh?
Yeah.
You guys went to sacrament meeting. You snuck to mutual.
Well, I
There
think.
was a big to-do over her going to BYU,
Yeah.
but she had earned the scholarship.
Yeah.
We couldn't afford to
Yeah.
pay for her to
And
go.
is that when he promised you that if you went out there and married
yeah,
a Mormon,
he
he
did.
would never set foot in the
Said,
West? Or
if you marry a Mormon, if you live in the West, I will never come and see you.
And he never did.
Okay, Grandma, I think the story that I want to hear you tell is when you came
Bananas.
to. We
Your
do want to
escape
hear you
story.
tell a Pamela. No, when you came to the wedding.
Jump off.
To
Oh,
Mom and
yes.
Dad's wedding. And you had to jump off the train, throw your luggage.
Yes.
You have not heard that story?
No,
I've never heard
that
that
was
story.
when I went back. Coming back, they didn't make a stop at Fort Lauderdale or Pompano Beach. They did slow down at Deerfield. And so I said, well, I guess I'll have to jump. Would you tell him, please, slow down real well. I don't want to get my legs cut off. And so that's what she did. I slung out my luggage and I jumped as far as I rolled in the cinders.
Horrible.
Well,
That was to come home from the wedding.
After Mom's wedding.
But it was
Go
because
back to Florida.
Norman was at a certain station to pick you up.
Yes.
And he did not know that you
Yes.
were going to be let off at a different
Yes.
station.
Yes.
So you had to jump out because he wouldn't get the message that he
Yes.
needed to go somewhere
And,
else.
and so I went to the nearest
Thank goodness for
building
cell
there on the
Yeah.
tracks
Yeah.
and told him my predicament and said, please, will you telephone Deerfield Beach so my husband will know where I am to come and get me.
Wow.
But Grandma, what about when you got lost too on that same trip? They had unhooked your rail
Yes.
car.
Wow.
I got off the train for,
We were together.
yeah,
It was on the way.
Oh,
to
that was on the
Utah.
way to
yeah, for her wedding. And we
Because
got
in
off
St. Louis.
because we were running short of food. I had taken food that wouldn't spoil, but we were getting hungry and we didn't have much left.
Well, it seems like we wanted to mail postcards too.
Yes,
And while we were off of the train, they moved the train.
yes. And, well, and they not only moved the train, but it was facing a different direction. They unhooked the car and
And hooked another engine up to it
yes,
on the
that
other
was
end.
it. Hooked another engine.
we finally found it, but it was after running around frantically.
Trying
We
to
we couldn't remember the name of our train. It
Oh,
was like the Denver Rio Grande something or other. So we were saying, please, can you help us find the DRWG, the DGRW? We didn't know what to call it, but we finally found it. Just in the nick of time before it took off.
Can you do that for the whole time we sit here, please?
Well, Grandma, thank you so much. That was, I had bits and pieces of it, but not.
all together. That was perfect.
And I've never heard the David on McKay part.
And
Is
you
there
never
anything
heard
else you wanna
nothing
say?
about the train?
Hold on, but I don't know if maybe this isn't a good story or if this is a painful story, but what the story about getting here.
Yes,
I
that's
mean, that's the last story I would want to,
Really-
unless you
Have
don't want to share
recorded.
that story.
Did you stop the recording?
Because I don't know
Coming to
how
Arizona.
coming
Why-
When you
why
left Florida.
Yeah, how.
And your car accident.
And yeah, getting the car fixed.
Oh.
Is that a
When I met you in Houston.
You know, I think Grandma was in such a state of crisis at that time.
We
She
get
may
that
not
very
even-
good. And I don't
No, you
I don't
told
need you to
me-
say it if it's painful. But
No, I'm just trying to remember, why was I,
You drove away. You packed up a bunch of stuff that
When
you had
Richard was born.
purchased, and you were coming out west to live near us. And we'd found you a place to live in
yes,
a trailer.
yes,
over-
I informed you to find me a place to live, because I didn't want to live with Connie and Ron. I don't think that's good.
And we had,
How come
we
we're
had
doing
told
it now?
That's not good.
we had told you to get to Houston. I mean, get
It wasn't good then.
No, because we're family,
Yeah,
all right?
we didn't tell about the car
So
wreck.
it had something about me being born, right? Didn't you come out to
Yes.
see me or something and
You-
make a plan? Or
You were coming out anyway to help Mom with Richard because Richard was born.
Actually, you were accompanying a lady from Florida to Canada.
Yes,
She was elderly and needed a companion.
and she was rich.
And
she
she
was rich.
she really
She
couldn't
had-
afford
yeah.
to come when Richard was born, but she made
Was
this
able
little
to catch a
detour
ride.
after.
Made the detour
Yes.
from Canada.
Yeah,
Yes,
Since it was on the way.
Well, on the way back from
Everything's on the way to
Canada, we stopped in Denver, and I hurried to the ticket office and said, "Can I cash in this return to Florida for Arizona?" He said, "Sure, where you want to go?" And so that's how that happened. So I phoned him to tell him I was coming.
And then I think it was just a month or two later that you realized you
Yeah, it was only
needed
about
to
2
leave.
months later.
2 months later.
So you came and saw me after I was born. And then a month or two later you realized you need to come, you need to
You
leave.
needed to leave Florida
Uh-huh.
and come. And in the meantime,
Something happened.
you'd had like 2 broken
Norman had
feet.
gone fishing at Clear Springs or whatever,
Clearwater.
and you chose that time to pack up and leave.
Yes, and I left him a letter explaining why. Because it had gotten so intolerable living with him because his drinking had gotten completely uncontrolled. He couldn't leave it alone.
Is that why he would sleep half the days on Sundays?
Yes, but the worst thing was he got mean, and he got
Abusive.
physically abusive to me.
And threatened.
And I had promised myself years before that if it got to that, I was leaving. I would not put up with physical abuse. I could handle the mental, but not the physical.
And that's when all that kind of started.
Yes, and so when he was especially abusive one night. He started beating on me when I was asleep. And that's horrible to wake up and think someone is in your house and they're beating on you. I couldn't even understand it was him for a little while. And then I could talk to him and get him calmed down. And then he just lay down in bed and went to sleep. There was no saying I'm sorry or I didn't know, nothing. And so I said to myself, this is it. You promised yourself when this happened, This was it. Now stick to your promise. And so I began to make plans while he was gone fishing. I had a lawyer that convinced me the best way to do it was for me to be gone when he got home from fishing. And I said, but I don't want to just leave with no explanation, no talking. He said, you can write him a letter. I said, what can I say in a letter? He said, I will dictate to you over the phone what you can say, and then you make the decision if you want to do that. And so that's what we did. And it was so clear what he dictated, so better than I ever could have thought of doing, that I just wrote it like he said. And that meant I had to get out of there quick while he was still gone. And so I called the friends that had been my friends ever since I moved there, and she came over and helped me decide what I absolutely wanted to take. And I wanted to take my dining room set that we had worked so hard to pay for. It was the most beautiful maple, cherry maple. And so that's what we did. I packed up the dining room set in the U-Haul and took clothes. I had made Norman shirts for many years because he liked pure cotton shirts, and they didn't sell them back then. So I always made his shirts. And when I made them usually 8 or 9 at a time, because I could get a better deal on material. I was in the process of making him 9 shirts. And I thought, whew, this means I gotta finish those shirts before I go. So boy, I didn't sleep very much. But I got those 9 shirts done and hung in the closet. And within 3 days, I was on my way.
And you had bottled a lot of fruit and things. And
Yes.
You tried to bring your food storage.
Yes, I tried to bring it because I knew it would just go to waste. And I didn't know what job, if any, I would be able to get in a small town. I had talked to Ron, and he had said, I don't know that we need anybody at the college. I don't know what you can do.
So it was helpful.
So I felt like I wanted to start to see if I couldn't live close to be with Connie and Ron and the children. And so
You started out on the trip, but you were quite nervous, weren't you? You were frightened.
yes, I was scared. I had never pulled a U-Haul. And when I got to northern Florida, it started to rain. And in northern Florida are where you have the hills. South Florida is flat. And I came up over one of those hills, and there was an old car slow in the lane that I was in. So I had to turn and get around him without braking to make the U-Haul jackknife. Well, it jackknifed instead, regardless of what I did. And I got around him, and in correcting, trying to get back into the right-hand lane, I overcorrected and got up onto a guardrail that was there. Thank heavens it caught in the underside of my car and kept me from going on over, because it was a very deep ravine. And so there I was, stuck on top of the guardrail, and the U-Haul was jackknifed beside me, blocking the route that other cars would need. So I couldn't get the doors open on the car. So I climbed over to the back seat and was able to get a back door open, just a little, so I could squeeze out. And I started running backward on the highway. and some man was yelling at me, "Lady, stop! Lady, stop!" And I finally turned to see who it was, and I said, "I can't stop." He said, "Yes, you can. You stop right now." And he come running up, and he said, "Why were you running?" And I said, "I got to stop traffic back in time so they can get stopped so they don't run into my U-Haul in the car." He said, "I will take care of it. You sit down here right now and don't you move." And so I minded him. I sat down on the parking, and he took off running, and he got back further where I was trying to head for to flag off traffic. And then someone phoned the highway patrol, and they came out with a wrecker and got me situated. And I rode back in the wrecker car with the man who was driving it. And I said, "Where are we?" And he told me, and it was the name of the town where Norman was fishing. I thought, oh, I can't believe this.
Oh, it's horrible.
So I sat there and I thought, there's a way around this. So the man that was pulling my wreckage, I said, "Do you have a place where you're taking it to repair and so on that doesn't show from the road?" He says, "Yeah, I can do that and pull around and back." I said, "Would you do that, please? I would feel better if my car was not exposed." And I didn't explain. And I said, "Now, is there a hotel nearby where your business is that you can drop me off?" And he said, "Yeah, there is." So that's what we did. He dropped me off, and he took off to hide that. And I told him, "I will get a taxi, and I will come as soon as I can talk to my insurance company, and we'll deal." And so that's the way it turned out. It was just perfect.
And then you called us.
It was just perfect.
Except that your car really didn't get fixed.
No.
They put it together with wire and bubble gum and whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
And your furniture was damaged in the
Oh yes, yeah. But it was made roadworthy. That was the words I wanted to hear. Of course, it drove like a Mack truck, but it was roadworthy. And thank goodness Ron came to meet me, because I don't think I would have had strength enough to fight that steering all the way to Thatcher.
So did you call them right after the wreck and
Yes.
tell them come meet me, and then by the time they got to Houston, you got to
No,
Houston?
actually, they had called before that.
Where did you meet?
I've got to level with you. We had originally talked about going to Florida, and I said, "I can't do that."
Uh-huh.
I said, "I don't feel good about going to Florida
Like you're
because it
still in
puts
your
me
way,
in a position where I want to be in." I said, "If you can make it to Texas," that's where my brother lived.
Right.
I said, "If you can make it to Texas, I'll bring you the rest of the way." And I'll never forget the sight. There's this big, huge bridge in Houston
You just
that
take
crosses
the
the ship channel, and it's huge. And I remember sitting somewhere on the other side of the bridge, and all of a sudden I see this apparition coming over that bridge of a car that looked like something out of the Beverly Hillbillies. I mean, it was. I can't describe what that car looked like.
Is there a picture that documents that anywhere?
I wish.
In his mind.
I wish there was. I don't know, but anyway, she got there. And then I drove her the rest of the way. It took us 2 days. We went from Houston to wherever that place, Fort Stockton.
Were you
And
worried?
then drove in, and we had rented her a little trailer over by the Lucases. And we pulled that car into the trailer, parked, and it died.
Yes, it honestly
that was
died.
It was not. It was done.
It gave up.
That was great. One thing this is a tribute to Mom, really a tribute to Grandpa Norman too, that when Grandpa Norman died, and I was the only grandchild that got to go to that funeral. Oh, I do not want to be honest. No. you know, Grandpa Norman promised Mom that if she married a Mormon, and he would never come visit her, and he never did. And when we walked into Grandpa Norman's house, Mom collapsed. She just had to sit down because all over his house was all of our pictures. And Mom,
almost like wallpaper.
Like wallpaper. And Mom had faithfully written her dad every single week. And not knowing how much those letters and those pictures meant to him, he lived for us. We were his lifeblood. And he had mental illness, he had issues, he had problems, but he did love Mom. And he did love us. Would you agree? And it was surprising to Mom. That's why she collapsed, because she never felt like it was reciprocated, and so it was surprising.
You know, it was funny. Grandma Paul died 3 weeks before my dad, and we went to her funeral. Joanna didn't go to that one, but I was there.
With your dad.
And yeah, with my dad, and we took the video of your Eagle Project, where you were out there painting the hurdles, and then everybody was jumping the hurdles and having a great time. Everybody was trying it, and I showed that to my dad, and he said, "They're real people, aren't they?" It was just like we were something from a movie or a book or something, because he never saw us. Well, we did go sometimes. We went to Okoboji sometimes. Right.
Do you remember how when you got the call about him dying, I was playing the piano, recording a song for him on the piano?
Oh, yeah.
And you came in and you said Grandpa Norman just died, and I was recording him a song on the piano. So
I think that's a wonderful story, and I'm so great and everything, but at the same time, I place absolutely the highest regard for Grandma, because you could not have stayed in that situation.
No.
And I'm so grateful that you did not, Grandma. I'm sure that he did love his children and his grandchildren, but I'm so grateful that you kept yourself safe.
Well, and she.
Last 2 months on them. This is a wrap.
Oh, I want to hear it.
This is the time to tell you, if you haven't heard,